So, have you ever been watching TV just for laughs, gags? You know, like the one with the naked policeman who pretends to have a heart attack. People come up in the street to give him mouth-to-mouth, but they don't know that he just had a triple garlic and anchovy pizza just before. You had to be there. Hilarious. Well, you're watching that stuff, and you thought to yourself, there just isn't enough comedy about quantum magnetohydrodynamic physics on TV today. Right? Me too. Now, you can go to the soon-to-be reopened MZTV, MZTV, Museum of Television and Archives, and you can check in the records for reminders of what's now known as the golden age of technical comedy television, where the equation was always 1 + 1 = fun. You're supposed to laugh at that, so just give you some instructions here. And speaking of equations and speaking of going ahead of things, E = mc². Historians now recognize that Albert Einstein was the unhailed Howie Mandel of his generation. Strangely enough, nobody seems to consider Howie Mandel to be the unhailed Albert Einstein of his generation or any other generation for that matter. And who but the CBC could put theoretical comedy into physics? Oh, I mean, theoretical physics into comedy. Actually, I might have had it right the first time. Have you seen some of the new CBC shows? And how many of you out there have said to yourself, there just isn't enough stand-up comedy with editorial cartoons? Oh, look, a groundswell of support. Terry Mosher and I decided to fill this void in the edutainment universe. Our first challenge, what to call our new show. I'm a rocket scientist, so the title has to contain the word space. Space. The word alone evokes images of William Shatner. And so we decided we needed something more. We needed something that evoked the organic nature of discovery in the cosmos, the childlike wonder of looking up at the night sky, and Oscar Wilde's belief that we are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking up at the stars. In other words, something that you could write on the wall of a toilet stall. And so we went and looked up, and we looked north for our inspiration. When you look up in the night sky, you might see one of these. What would you call this? Comet? It's not a comet. Shooting star, falling star, exactly. Shooting star, that's our nickname for a meteor. Has nothing to do with stars. This was a grain of space sand that hit the Earth's atmosphere at a speed of 200,000 kilometers per hour and generated so much heat that it caused the air to glow around it as it streaked through the sky and burned itself up in a fraction of a second. Now, when Inuit children look up in the night sky and they see a meteor, they have a much more sensible name for it. In Inuktitut, this is it. Ublarak Anak. Ublarak Anak. In English, literal translation, star shit. We had the inspiration for our show. Now, I can hear a rumbling, murmurs amongst some of you that this title might not be appropriate for all audiences. Terry and I have thought about this, and when we take it on the road and we present it at high schools, universities, elementary schools, we have come up with a a different version of the poster that's more accessible to the youth-oriented audience. There we go. That's not in Inuktitut, that's in English. If you don't understand it, just ask any teenager. Ask Moses, actually. In my experience, Moses seems to be plugged into the zeitgeist of every generation, and so he probably can translate this for you as well. So you may have noticed that Terry and I bear a resemblance to another famous celebrity duo. Not Brad and Angelina. Not even Homer and Marge, although the resemblance is striking. But I'm thinking of Penn and Teller. And in this case, Terry is the pen, and I'm the teller. You may have noticed that Terry does not speak. Terry's editor at the Montreal Gazette believes that cartoonists should be seen and not heard. There are some people out there that believe that cartoonists should not even be seen. As it turns out, actually, Terry never speaks. You may have thought that you heard him talking at last night's cocktail party at the Rosewater Supper Club, or at a Cartoonists Without Borders rally. But that is thanks to a crack team of guerrilla ventriloquists, paid for through a Canada Council grant and supported by the Canadian government's mandate to declare a moratorium against the use of land mimes. Now, if only we could silence Celine Dion. Ooh, tough audience. We got to work on this before we take this to the MGM Grand in Vegas. We're talking about science. Science and IdeaCity is all about discovery. Let me give you as an example, gravity. Understanding gravity is the key missing element in the grand unified theory of physics. Literally, the theory of everything. And it is the holy grail that has eluded the top scientists of our time, who keep trying to roll up the grail and win, and all we end up doing is having to pour ourselves more coffee. Gravity was discovered by Sir Isaac Newton. Well, to be honest, the first creature to discover gravity was the first creature to do a face plant. And Einstein didn't discover gravity, but he got to the core of the behavior of gravity on Earth, inspired by falling apples. And the mythology is that he was asleep under an apple tree, got hit by an apple, and came up with the universal equation for gravitational force. Now, apples are actually the inspiration for science fiction characters, and possibly in the future, science fact explorers, to travel between the stars, which are incredibly far apart. Because Einstein showed us that gravity is basically a distortion of space and time. Gravity bends the very fabric of space. And in some circumstances, it can be bent so severely that it becomes a tunnel between two widely separated points in our three-dimensional spatial universe. Not a tunnel, a bridge. Physicists call this an Einstein-Rosen bridge. Science fiction writers call it a wormhole. It turns out that Terry, in a single image, has managed to combine general relativity, burlesque, and Montreal history. Because in the 1940s, the world-famous stripper, Lily St-Cyr, basically took a big bite out of Montreal by performing with a red delicious between her legs. And in this case, judging from the size of this particular apple, I think that Lily's warm front triggered an early growing season, and spring came early, or Terry came early. I wasn't there when he made this. Mary, can you attest to what happened? Going back to Newton. And there really is an apple tree that was outside of Newton's Cambridge University office. And he probably wasn't asleep under it, but he was watching the apples fall. And that almost certainly was the kind of inspiration. And we've heard about that from previous speakers at this IdeaCity, of avoiding the linear way of thinking outside the box and being inspired by those hunches. And in 1969, when the Triumph Cyclotron Accelerator Lab was unveiled at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, the director at that time, the first director, brought from England 6 cuttings from Newton's apple tree and planted them. And they grew, and now you can come to UBC and fall asleep under one of those apple trees, wait for gravity to take its effect on the fruit, and you could discover the next big thing in science. If the locals let you. So, science and IdeaCity is all about connecting the dots. It's basically, and there is no better example of that than looking up at night and looking at the patterns of the stars, the dots in our night sky, the constellations. Think of the time before electricity, before electronic telecommunications, before the stuff that Moses has in some sense perfected in modern television. The sky, the night sky, was the original widescreen plasma TV. That's where everyone got, oops, and I'm out of sequence. Here, we had a little bit of a hassle here. Let's double back. I can't see what's behind me, unfortunately. I am an alien, but the eye behind my back of the head is undergoing treatment right now. I had mentioned while giving the telescopes as door prizes that this is the International Year of Astronomy. 400 years ago, this summer, Galileo first pointed a telescope that way. He didn't invent the telescope, but he was the first person to think about pointing it away from the Earth, not in some neighbor's window, that kind of thing. Astronomers around the world are celebrating this. And when astronomers party, watch out. Here's an astronomer, you may or may not know, who is doing shaking yoga with Inga Beebe, at the time Miss Universe Canada, at a previous IdeaCity. And I'm happy to let you know that in the audience right now is the current Miss Universe Canada. Miss Valente, are you out there? Would you stand up and take a bow? Marina Valente? Ayala, may I reserve a disco yoga session with you tonight at the Sea Lounge? Obrigado. Obrigado. Ms. Valente was born in São Paulo, Brazil, so you can practice your Portuguese as well. And, by the way, for those of you that have missed some of the astronauty party antics of astronomers around the world during the International Year of Astronomy, upstairs in the IdeaCity bookshop, you can buy the DVD that provides you with a record of that. Papal discretion is advised. All right. Now we're talking about science connecting the dots, are we? Oh, hey, the ventriloquists are still at work. Sorry about that. Maybe actually, just in case the ventriloquists get a little bit rambunctious, we could actually just... There you go. That's a good look for you, Terry. Yeah, especially from back here. No. So, as I was saying before, science and IdeaCity are all about connecting the dots, the dot patterns that are above us in the skies at night, the constellations. The original widescreen plasma TV. Am I in the right place? Yes, I am. The sky is filled with gloves. There we go. The sky is filled with bears and whales and flying horses and princesses and even an armpit, believe it or not. But, you know, Terry and I can't see any of them. And I'm a rocket scientist, for Christ's sake. I'm sorry, for Hawking's sake. We're convinced that the very first people to name the constellations were also the first people to ferment wine and to possibly indulge in certain herbal medicinal remedies about which we've heard. And I'm again out of sequence again. Sorry about that. We're unveiling this for the very first time, and it hasn't been rehearsed, and things were a little bit frantic, suiting me up ahead of time. The constellations are basically like Rorschach tests in the sky, an ink blot test. And to demonstrate that idea, let me invite one of you to enter into Dr. Mosher's therapy session. So can I have a volunteer? Somebody, oh, there we go. Somebody is very enthusiastic. What's your name? Vivian. Vivian, would you just mind standing up for a moment? Vivian, we're going to show you an ink blot. And we want to know what you see. 2 halves of a butterfly. You know, we're on a very similar wavelength, because when I first saw this, I thought of 2 butterflies that were coming together to have wild, passionate butterfly sex. but yeah, and then they split into half, and that's really kinky sex, if you like. Okay, why do you see butterflies? I have butterflies in my stomach right now, believe it or not, despite this.
Because I do.
You do? Okay, that's the kind of answer I get from my students at UBC. Why did you say that? Because. Well, you know what it is, and I think there is a deeper meaning in there, that a subconscious meaning that you don't recognize, and you probably don't think that you can pull it out from beneath. But let me tell you, yes, you can. There. You voted for Obama, did you?
I'm Canadian.
Yeah, but there were Canadians who voted for Obama. You know, I mean, they did the thing in Florida for Bush. We had things behind the scenes. Obama won because there were all of these bogus Canadian votes that we put into the system. Thank you very much, Vivian. Give Vivian a round of applause. So looking up at night is literally like looking at cosmic ink blots in the sky. And here's one of them. This is the constellation of Cassiopeia, the queen, Cassiopeia. Don't strain too hard to try to see the queen and connecting the dots there. But it turns out, I'm convinced that Picasso might have been looking in this direction in the sky when he painted his Queen of the Amazons with servant. And there you go. It leaps out to the eye now, doesn't it? In fact, as I said before, I'm convinced that the first people that named the constellations were the first people to discover medicinal marijuana. And in fact, high over the skies of British Columbia right now is this constellation. I did say high over the skies, remember. On that theme, this is your sky. This is your sky on drugs. This is your sky on absinthe. And this is your sky on the Discovery Channel. Remember what Inuit children call meteors, star droppings. It adds a whole new sense of interpretation to some of the real constellations which are over our heads. It's as if God were telling us, sorry, Canis Major isn't quite cosmos trained yet. Aww. And talking about Galileo 400 years ago, the stars, here's the real scoop on the stars. They're so far away that by eye, we can't tell which ones are close to us and which ones are far away, except for the sun, which is so close to us. It's only 150 million kilometers away, and that's right next to us. But otherwise, the stars look like they're studded on some vast crystalline sphere with us at the center. And this geocentric theory of the universe persisted, held sway for 15 centuries. Today, modern historians of science call the theory that we're at the center of the universe and everything in the universe revolves around us as the Ben Mulroney-centric theory. Now, Terry, your version of Ben looks a lot like his father, Brian. Terry, I've learned, has a bit of an obsession with Brian Mulroney. In fact, Mulroney took out a restraining order. Terry's pen can't come closer than 50 meters to Brian Mulroney's chin. And Terry would not be here right now if Moses had not bailed him out of an Ottawa jail. Terry had gone up to Ottawa, visiting the National Gallery, and was lingering by the official portrait of Brian Mulroney. And the scamp that he is, he could not resist touching it up a little. Now, Galileo touched up our portrait of the cosmos to show us that we weren't at the center of the universe, even though it looks like the stars are painted on a canvas overhead. And if we go to the slide, yeah. And so if we went to another star, a planet around another star, if there are other civilizations like the ones that Pascal Lee speculated about earlier, and we looked up in the sky, the sun would be one of the stars in an alien constellation. We saw that during the Powers of 10 movie yesterday morning. But even on our Earth, even looking at the familiar stars, different cultures have different perspectives on them. What we call the Big Dipper, the Brits call the Plough, and the Inuit call the Caribou. But then, to the Inuit, this is a Winter Olympic athlete. So, go figure, eh? Oh, okay. Imagine what it would be like if we had never seen the stars until last night. Imagine that the Earth had been shrouded in clouds for all of human history, like a Vancouver winter that lasted millions of years. How would we connect the dots today? What would be our 21st century constellations? Here is one which the ancients called Sagittarius, the archer. Yeah, right. And this is the kind of thing that would give a GPS a nervous breakdown. Yeah. I should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque. Error, error. Could you introduce me to that cute BlackBerry in your glove compartment? The thing is, like, even a GPS would have a hard time navigating in this thing. How would we connect the dots today? Let me show you how I connected the dots after yesterday's seventh inning stretch at IdeaCity. This is the new constellation of Tyche Znaimerarius. And I saw a few of you that were in that kind of pose yesterday during the break. Yeah, like, sorry, I'm just off my game here. How would politicians and celebrities see the constellation today? Well, of course, Don Cherry is his own constellation. He doesn't have to look up in the sky to experience that. I have to look over my partner's shoulder just to see where we are. Good. That's where we are. And also, he's got a kick me sign on the back. Don't tell him that. Yep. Yeah, we're working on it, and there's a big finish here. And don't you give me any sass after this. Let me conclude by talking about the way that many of you may perceive the stars and the planets. Many people believe that the stars and planets actually play a role in governing their lives through astrology. Astronomers, myself, have a hard time with that. Partly, it's like horoscopes. Why don't you ever read a horoscope in a newspaper that says, you are an evil, malicious bastard who pulls the wings off of flies and farts at funerals? I mean, there are people like that. Don't they have a horoscope? I never read those horoscopes. We also, what if all of the planets were in opposition? There are so many conundrums associated with astrology. And I have, and other astronomers have, another problem with astrology, and let me try to explain it to you, just share it with you. I was backstage, but I believe somebody is celebrating a birthday today. Who's celebrating a birthday today? Hi. Could you stand up for a moment, please? What's your name? Charmaine. Charmaine, happy birthday. Yeah. What's your sign? I've always wanted to ask that. What's your sign? Gemini. Okay. That's I'm going to do that tonight at Sea Lounge too. Hey, come here often. What's your sign? Gemini. Charmaine, I hate to break it to you, but you are not a Gemini. You are a Taurus. No bull. Your sun sign, your birth sign, your sign of the zodiac is where the sun was located in the sky when you were born, in that constellation. Let's look at where the sun was when you were born. Hey, well, maybe the astrologers were right. It is in Gemini on your birthday. And this is, this is today, but I'm guessing you were born 20 years ago? Yeah, okay. So that won't differ. But except this isn't your birth date when you were born. This is your birth date, 9 AD, 2,000 years ago. Thank you. The sun was in Gemini on your birth date 2,000 years ago. Here's where it is today. It's in the constellation of Taurus. Why is that? The Babylonians, you heard about the Babylonians from one of our previous speakers today, came up with what we consider the modern system of astrology and the signs of the zodiac. But they were not aware of the way the Earth rotated. They made measurements that allowed scientists to understand that the Earth's rotation is slowing down, but they didn't really know that the Earth was rotating. And it turns out that the Earth is spinning like a top. And like a top, it's wobbling. But it doesn't wobble in just a fraction of a second. It takes 26,000 years to complete one wobble. We call this global precession. Not to be confused with global recession, which is on everybody's minds these days. And so, if you go back 2,000 to 3,000 years ago and look at the way that the sky was, then, in fact, the sun was in Gemini on your birthday in 9 AD. But what party-pooping astronomers like me have a hard time with is why should that have anything to do with your life today? And thousands of years from now, your sun sign on that birth date will be a completely different one as well. And so we have a little bit of trouble with that. But maybe we should pay attention to it, because this is also another birthday. This is the birthday of IdeaCity. And as IdeaCity's resident rocket scientist, I've explained to you that IdeaCity's horoscope, birth sign, astrological sign, is Taurus. And here is Terry's Taurian tribute to IdeaCity. Wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it. Voila! The unveiling of a brand new astrological sign of the zodiac. You were here, you saw it here first. So, on behalf of the sharp pencil and the dull prof, will you please join us in wishing IdeaCity a very happy 10th birthday? And with that, class dismissed. Live long and perspire.
Well done.
Happy birthday.
Thank you so much, Jaymie.